you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how other writers have applied those principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. I'm Melanie Hill, editor, poet, and award-winning author of middle grade novel Jet Cooper, and I help writers identify and solve their story problems.
And I'm Valerie Francis. I am a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
For today's What Went Right episode, Valerie chose Vertigo. Sorry. This 1958 film was directed by Alfred Hitchcock from a screenplay by Alfred Hitchcock, Alex Koppel, Samuel A. Taylor, and Maxwell Anderson. And it's based on the 1954 novella by Pierre Boileau and Thomas Narcy-Jacques. Now, of course, there will be spoilers because we can't talk about the movie without talking about the movie. And please help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and review. And for Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Simply go to the show's landing page and scroll to the bottom. It's that simple. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like button and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. All right, Valerie, I'm saving my power, keeping my powder dry. Over to you.
All right. Well, I chose this film because it's a Hitchcock film, and I'm working my way through the Hitchcock catalog because my knowledge of his films is not what it should be. And I chose it because it is sort of generally regarded as his best film or one of his best films, and I had not seen it before I chose it. I think it's important for me to explain that I had not seen it before I chose it, and that it perhaps does not age particularly well. I know Melanie's going to talk all about that, and maybe we'll get into a discussion of it. But let me just dive into my notes here. All right, I want to start by reiterating the spoiler alert warning. Even though the movie came out in 1958, if you have not yet watched Vertigo, but you plan to, or you're not already aware of the famous twists and turns of the plot, you might want to pause this episode and circle back to it later. If, however, you have no intention of watching Vertigo, then keep listening. All right. So the question that we're exploring today is what went right with Vertigo? Well, this is Hitchcock, so I don't think it's going to surprise anyone that I think even in this movie, he does narrative drive really well. Now, he's known as the master of suspense, but I tend to think of him as the master of narrative drive. And the thing that drives a narrative is this: it's questions. Our job as storytellers is to plant questions in our readers' minds. And these are questions that come from curiosity, not confusion. And this is true of all genres, although, to be fair, it is perhaps less difficult, I'm not going to say easier, but less difficult to create narrative drive in genres like horror and thriller, which Hitchcock is known for, than it is in, say, a character-driven story. But all stories need to have narrative drive, and the fuel that drives your narrative forward is questions. Okay, so in story theory terms, there are 3 types of narrative drive. There is mystery, there's suspense, and dramatic irony. So mystery is when the character knows more than the reader. Suspense is when the character and the readers have the same information. And dramatic irony is when the character knows less than the reader. So this means that to drive a narrative forward, we got to control the flow of information to the reader. Typically, one form of narrative drive applies to the story as a whole, but, and this is important, quite often there is 2 or maybe even all 3 forms of narrative drive present at different times in the story because they do different things. They entice the reader different ways. There's no formula here. This is not a formulaic thing. If anyone tries to give you a formula or a template or anything like that for narrative drive, run screaming in the other direction because there is none. This is pure craft at play here. This is very much understanding what each of these three forms of narrative drive do and how they look in different stories. This is about the writer deciding when and how to reveal information so that more questions arise in the reader's mind, questions that they are compelled to find answers to. And the only way they get the answers is to keep reading, right? The reader wants to know what happens next. I mean, this is pure storytelling artistry. Okay, the only way, and this is, I'm speaking from experience, I know only one way to learn narrative drive and to get better at using narrative drive. And it's by studying lots of stories, lots of different types of stories and lots of different genres from different eras, from writers from different countries, and just examine suspense, mystery, and dramatic irony and really look at what's being used where and what effect it has. And then, of course, by playing with it in your own work, playing with the flow of information and moving in and out of the different types of narrative drive to see how it impacts the story that you're telling. So I'm going to tell you this right now. There are precious few writers who will ever bother to take the time or do the work to learn this and to master it. It is the thing that most interests me in storytelling, that I am most fascinated with. I'm a bit addicted to it. I gotta say, uh, and even amongst story nerds, I see them glass over when I start to talk about it. So, not Melanie. No, Melanie, you're such a trooper. You're hanging in there with me and all my crazy adventures. Um, but listen, if you want your work to stand out from the crowd, mastering narrative drive is going to do it. Because if you're really good at narrative drive, it doesn't matter what type of story you're writing. The reader is going to have to read to the end of your book because they're going to be so curious to know what happens next. That's my goal. That's the star I'm shooting for in my writing career. So let's see how close I get to it by the time I croak. All right. I mean, the reason writers won't do it, Melanie, is because this will take decades. Like, this will take the rest of my career to really master it, if indeed I master it at all. Even Hitchcock, who we call the master of suspense, I think of him as the master of narrative drive, even he didn't do it perfectly all the time. And as Exhibit A, I offer you Vertigo. Anyway, let me get into Vertigo. So that Melanie has plenty of time for her rant, which I can't wait to hear. So, for the purpose of today's study, I am going to look at uh, just one aspect. I have to keep it narrow, and that is just the questions part of narrative drive. There tends to be, not tends to be, there must be one question that hangs over the whole story that is so big and so compelling that we need to know the answer to it. Like, so in a murder mystery, the question is who done it? We have to find out by the end of the book and not before the end of the book who the murderer is. In a romance, the question that hangs over it is how do they get together? It's not do they get together because happily ever after is a convention of a romance. It's how do they get together? Like, that's the question that we're sticking around to find the answer to. So sometimes the question is baked into the genre, sometimes it isn't. It really depends on your story. But even though there's one question that's hanging over the whole story that sort of drives the main narrative forward, in each of the smaller units of story, they have their own questions, right? So every scene is going to have its own. Every sequence is going to have its own. Every act will have its own. All right, let's get into Vertigo. Am I running long yet? Probably. I'm speaking really fast so I don't go over on time. Okay. Um, like I said, it's challenging to talk about narrative drive on a podcast. Like, in a perfect world, I would work one-on-one with someone and we would really get into a story and I'd be mapping things out and drawing diagrams, and so it's because it's easier to explain visually. And I would break the story down into its various components, right? Into its various units of story. And we would identify the questions for each unit of story. And then we would look at how those questions work together. How are they sort of counterpoint to each other? And most of all, how are they propelling the narrative forward? Okay, so for the purposes of today, I'm going to focus in on the main question hanging over the whole story. And it's this: what the heck is going on with Madeline? That's basically it. The nuance of that question slightly changes depending where you are in the story. But if we're going to just use one question as a whole for, say, the first 2/3 of the movie, it's what the heck's going on with Madeline? Then we have the big twist, the big plot twist, and the question that drives the rest of the remaining part of the story forward is, what is Scott going to do to Judy? Like, what the heck's up with that? Right? So now, Melanie, I suspect that in 1958, when you have Jimmy Stewart as the lead in your film, the questions were probably more about Scotty, right? He is the protagonist. He is played by Jimmy Stewart. Um, I am a woman in 2026. I'm a feminist. And so my natural interest was on the women in this film. And as much as I like Jimmy Stewart, he was not really grabbing my attention. I'll be perfectly honest. Um, but and I watched this with my daughter, and we were both really thinking about the women and what was going on with them. And in Midge's case, why was she even in the movie? Because that storyline could have been removed and it wouldn't have mattered. Anyway, back to the questions. So at about the 13-minute mark, that's when Scotty goes to his friend Gavin's office. And Gavin says that he is afraid that harm will come to his wife, Madeline, from someone who is dead. Now, that is interesting. That does pique our interest. We do sit forward and go, what? Like, the first part of his argument to Scotty is that he wants Scotty to follow his wife around because he's afraid that she's in danger. Already, that's pretty interesting in story terms. We're already wondering, well, what kind of danger? From whom? But when he says from someone who is dead, I mean, I wasn't expecting it. And so I thought, wait a minute, how could that be? What does he mean? How could someone who is dead cause harm to someone who is living? So we're sitting forward now and we're wanting to hear more. So then Gavin says he suspects his wife may be possessed. Okay, you're going to have one of two reactions to this. Either you reject it out of hand like Scotty does, or you are intrigued. But either reaction increases our curiosity. Because if she is possessed, this is going to give us one type of story in a very specific genre. And then we like, if we're going to believe that this is true, we're going to start thinking questions like, how is she possessed? By who? Why? How does that manifest? And if we reject that idea out of hand, we have questions in our heads like, why would he suggest that? Does he actually think that? What is she doing that makes her husband think she is literally possessed? And again, possessed by who, why, and how does it manifest? Like, so there's questions either way. And these questions just get planted in our mind and they start to grow. And they grow and they grow, and other things that happen in the story might be fuel to help them grow more, or it might make us realize, oh no, that part that we thought was going to happen, that's not going to happen. This other thing is going to happen, and oh, that's just as interesting. So one question sort of begets another question as the story goes along when your narrative drive is functioning properly. So when Scotty starts to follow Madeline and we start to witness her behavior, all these questions are niggling in the back of our mind. Is she possessed or not? Like, what's going on here? Melanie, I don't know about you, but I mean, I love a good bit of woo-woo, and I love a good bit of supernatural stuff in my films and my stories, all my stories. But in this case, I was thinking, oh, surely she's not possessed, is she? I don't know if I'm buying that. But I also wasn't 100% sure that she wasn't. So that was enough to engage me. And if if we still reject it out of hand, we're still wondering, what is she doing? Because we're following her in a day. We don't hear from her, like she doesn't have any lines, no one is speaking to her. She goes to an art gallery, she goes in and picks up some flowers, she goes to a a graveyard and goes to a grave site, and then she, most curious of all, goes into a hotel where she is renting a room, and she just goes and sits there for a period of time and leaves. Like, what is all of that about? And we're still wondering about Gavin. What's going on with Gavin? Why does why has he hired someone to follow his wife? And we were talking before we hit record. The other thing that I was thinking at this time is, surely Madeline sees Scotty, because he's not a master of subterfuge. He's pretty he's in this white fancy car that stands out just in and of itself with the white wall tires and everything, but he's following her very closely. And then he parks where he can easily see her and she can easily see him, and he doesn't hide the fact that he is watching her. I mean, he doesn't literally have binoculars, but he could. He's eyeballing her pretty hard. So that made me wonder, is Scotty being set up here? Like, is Madeline in on this? If so, what is it that she's in on? Like, what the heck is happening here? And again, it wasn't questions that were arising as of confusion, because I could easily follow the plot. It's not what's happening with the plot specifically. It's how what tale is being spun here? Who's using who? Those types of questions. And that goes, like I said, for the first 2/3 of the film. And even though I will admit there are parts of the film that are slow, they are slow. They might not have been slow to an audience in 1958, but by today's standards, they're slow, and there's plot holes abound. I will just say that. I'll leave the rest for Melanie. Um, the narrative drive is still compelling enough that I kept watching. I was still curious to know what the heck was going on with Madeline, Gavin, and Scotty. All right, so then here's the big plot twist. We discover that Madeline is actually not Madeline, Gavin's wife, at all, but an actress who has been hired by Gavin to play the role of his wife, and the actress's name is Judy. I just rolled my eyes at that point and went, okay, all right, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. I'll keep watching. Now, might it have worked for a 1958 audience? I don't know. Presumably it did. This is considered one of his best films. I think it's less effective in 2026. I wasn't really buying it. But anyway, there you go. I could go on, but I'm already way over time. So, Melanie, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you. Lay it on me, sister. How do you feel about Vertigo?
My gosh.
Strap in, everybody. Strap in.
Oh my God. So my original opening line in the script was, I'm warning you, I'm going to swear a lot. But Valerie reminded me that we have a clean rating on the podcast. So I won't do that. But you will get very clearly my intent and can probably insert words, choice words, where I've toned it down a little bit. Now, I really think that this is my Anora moment. And if you don't know what I mean, go back and listen to that episode. Now, the summary on Rotten Tomatoes about Vertigo and I quote, says that it's an unpredictable, scary thriller that doubles as a mournful meditation on love, loss, and human comfort. And I'm calling BS on that. This is a meditation on love, loss, and human comfort. I would like to know whose, and I'll give you the answer. The man's. That's whose. Oh my God. Anyway, and here's another description. Hitchcock's romantic story of obsession, manipulation, and fear. Since when did obsession, fear, and manipulation get to be described as romantic? Hopefully never. Now, some may say that I need to watch this through the lens of the time period that it was made, but I disagree. But if you must know, this movie was actually a flop when it came out because it didn't gel well with audiences. And there were a number of reasons for that. But it wasn't until the 1980s, after Hitchcock died, that this actual movie and the film was actually restored and re-released. And then it became critically acclaimed. But it's worth noting that audiences in the 50s didn't like it. Now, others may say that I need to look at the craft, and I would just like to say, what craft? What craft? The neon lighting in Judy's hotel? Yes, that was good. The scene representing Scotty's fall into madness? Well, that would be considered innovative for the time, but that's not the story, and I don't think that is the craft of telling a story either. Now, I found this movie boring and enraging at the same time. Now, Valerie mentioned last week that there were too many repeated scenes in Jason Bourne. Vertigo has the same problem. There are way too many scenes of Scotty following Madeline around in a car, and then there's other scenes when they're in the car together, and there are more of those scenes, I think, than any other scene in the whole movie. But at the same time, I didn't fear that something was going to happen, especially at the beginning of the movie. I was just hoping that something would happen because it was getting to me in about that 20, 30-minute mark. Like watching someone follow someone else around in a car is not very interesting. So I really hated this movie. I really, really hated it. And I actually felt very alone in that assessment. So I Googled, am I the only person who does not like the movie Vertigo? And it turns out I'm not. Thank goodness. But here is a quote from the Roger Ebert website. And I think that this just kind of a little bit, and I will specify a little bit, helped me understand things a little bit better. And this is what Roger said. Alfred Hitchcock was known as the most controlling of directors, particularly when it came to women. The female characters in his films reflected the same qualities over and over again. They were blonde, they were icy and remote. They were imprisoned in costumes that subtly combined fashion with fetishism. They mesmerized the men, who often had physical or psychological handicaps, and sooner or later, every Hitchcock woman was humiliated. Over and over in his films, Hitchcock took delight in literally and figuratively dragging his women through the mud, humiliating them, spoiling their hair and clothes, as if lashing at his own fetishes. So that's very enlightening and probably explains a lot of my very raw emotion when it came to watching that play out on screen. But if we review this film as Hitchcock's confession, then okay, but it is still extremely problematic. One man kills his wife and gets away with it. The other man, upset because the first man shaped the woman that he thought that he loved, has another go at recasting her in the image of the imaginary woman and leads her to her death. With no known consequences, neither of those men face any consequences for their actions. In fact, in the end, Judy is spooked by a nun, so a sexless woman who's devoted herself to God, and falls out the window to her death. Poor Scotty. He's left without love. How terrible. But at least he's alive, not like poor Madeline or Judy. So it's the women in this movie that pay the price for men's obsessions. Now, sure, Scotty is a deeply flawed man, and his flaws are on full display at the expense of the women, the typical Hitchcock women. And I had no empathy for Scotty, none. And this is for me problematic because he's the protagonist. Now, in another review, the following explanation is offered about the meaning layered into the film. And it said, the woman drained of her life by being transformed into a voyeuristic, fetishized object, in effect becomes the sacrificial victim murdered by the gaze of the patriarchal male obsessed with controlling and conquering death. Hitchcock turned Vertigo into an acidic commentary on the sexual politics of the 1950s, which dictated that a woman should do whatever it took to land and hold on to a man. For the woman blindly follows that course and, in doing so, gradually self-destructs before our eyes. Now, this prompted me to think, could Hitchcock, who was known to control and humiliate the women in his movies, really be offering an acidic commentary on the sexual politics of the 1950s? That's like saying Working Girls was Harvey Weinstein's cry for help, and that he was just a misunderstood man with a sex addiction who made great movies too. Flags for sale. My goodness, that is just ridiculous. If Vertigo was both a confession of Hitchcock's controlling and obsessive nature and a scathing critique of sexual politics, did it change anything? Did he change? No and no. If I hear one more narrative about brilliant but tortured male souls and how their art must be separated from the person, I am going to lose my mind. But now I have to come down because I've got to conclude the episode. So what I did like about this film were the Vertigo effects. I thought the way the camera was used to convey Scotty's fear of heights was good. But I would just say this as a final thought. If we look to stories to tell us or show us the ways of the world, and Vertigo is considered a masterpiece, then no wonder we're so screwed. All right, Valerie, what is your bottom line for Vertigo?
Melanie, how did you really feel about the movie?
Just like, there's no holding back. That nice Melanie went away.
I thoroughly enjoyed your analysis. Oh my God. So, so I watched this movie with my daughter, who's 23. And honestly, Melanie, we had this exact same discussion after the movie was over. And we were actually talking during the movie. At one point, my daughter said, "Why do these two women look so much alike?" And she was talking about Midge and Madeline. And my response was, well, all the women in Hitchcock movies kind of look like that. And I didn't have time to research, but I know he worked with Grace Kelly a lot. And then I thought, oh, maybe I'm just remembering Grace Kelly in a lot of movies, who is the same woman. That's why she looks so much like that. And I thought, was that a fair statement? And then you did the research and yeah, sure was. The way the women are portrayed in this movie is horrifying. It's frustrating. It's infuriating. It's all of the above, which is why I don't think it aged very well. And I think you were kind of afraid that maybe this was one of my favorite Hitchcock movies. Actually, I hadn't seen it before. I think Rear Window is much better. That the narrative drive in Rear Window is through the roof. So if you want to study narrative drive, get that one. Considering you have a passive or mostly passive protagonist who is sitting in his apartment with a broken leg. I mean, it's really well done. I did not spot the Hitchcock cameo. It just dawned on me. He always does a cameo in all his movies. I didn't spot it in this movie. I'm not going to rewatch it. to look for him, but he must be there somewhere. And there is nothing romantic about this. I don't know why it was marketed as a romance. Now that, in fairness, Hitchcock may not have had anything to do with it being pitched that way. I don't know. But the relationship between Scotty and Madeline is not romantic in any way. The relationship between Midge and Scotty is not romantic in any way. It's very much a friend. He's in the friend zone. She put him in the friend zone. They used to be engaged. She broke it off, and now he's in the friend zone to languish there for eternity. And the relationship between Scotty and Judy is not romantic in any way. Nor is the relationship between Gavin and his wife romantic in any way. They're not. They're violent, which kind of goes hand in hand with the obsession story. And love stories have many different types, right? There's absolutely romances, and you absolutely can have obsession love stories. But a romance and an obsession love story are very different things. Yeah, and the other thing is that, and I mentioned this earlier, the Midge storyline adds nothing to the film. One of the things that Avery and I said was, well, that could have just been taken out, because Midge actually disappears from the film about 2/3, just after the fake Madeline, or actually, really, the real Madeline's body is found, but we think it was the fake Madeline. That'll make sense to you if you've seen the film. So I'm actually reading the novel right now. I'm about a quarter of the way through it, and there is no Midge character. There's not even a mention of a Midge character. It is, so far, the plot line is only Gavin hiring Scotty to follow his wife, like that storyline. But now, Melanie, in saying all this, we have said in past episodes that we want to do a study on women in stories and storytelling. So I just want to make sure the flag is still on that one, because I really want to get to it. We've both been super busy and had a lot on our plate, but I want to make sure we don't forget that idea. Because I'm really interested. And I think a lot of other people would be interested too. That would be something that's fun to study. All right. Anyway, the bottom line when it comes to Vertigo. What is my bottom line? Well, it's about narrative drive and controlling the flow of information. A reader is on a need-to-know basis. So you don't tell them anything that they don't need to know, like up front. Like, what we tend to do is put big expository info dumps early in a story and fill in a lot of backstory and all that kind of stuff. The reader is on a need-to-know basis. Only tell them what they need to know when they need to know it. That's it. No extra information, no information too soon. Don't give away anything too quickly. You want to plant the question in their mind and answer it much later down the road. And the way you answer the first question is in such a way that the answer gives rise to more questions. And there's a real skill to that. I mean, the theory behind this is really easy to understand. It's plant a question in someone's mind. Well, that's not a difficult concept to understand. Pulling it off is super tricky. So whatever book you're reading now, in whatever genre, from whatever author, from whatever country, whatever period of time, as you're reading the book, ask yourself, what questions do I have about the story? There will be times when you don't have any questions. And those are the times when you realize you're reading the book because you think you're supposed to read the book. There's some celebrity book club person who said that this was a great book, but you don't get it. But you better read it because this is the book that you feel like you should be reading. If it's a bad book, put it down. Life's too short. Go on to another book, because there's lots of great books out there. If you're reading a great book, and the one that makes you stay up and read past your bedtime, ask yourself, why do I have to stay awake? Why am I compelled to read the next chapter? What question do I have in my mind that I need to know the answer to? I mean, that's a pretty big exercise, but I'm telling you, if you're willing to do the work on this one, your ROI will be through the roof. Melanie, what's your bottom line with respect to Vertigo?
The camera angles were interesting. That's it. That's really all I have to say about that. All right.
Oh my.
That wraps it up for this week. We'd love to know what you think of this What Went Right episode. And of course, if there's a film you would like us to take a look at, feel free to reach out to us either via email or social media and suggest one. Next week, we start season 19, so come and join us as we discuss Close Encounters of the Third Kind. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. For the power to write a best-selling story, visit storynerd.ca/courses. And to join Valerie's Inner Circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/innercircle. And for more information about my books, please visit me at melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.